Making a terrible mistake. Jeff Benedict and Armen did a wonderful job on Tiger Woods. Came out last Tuesday, and we will continue here along the way. That's the good side of the family. Let's go to the bad side. And you spend, half the book. It's 450-something pages, and half the book is, about Tiger doing some bad things. Jeff, I'll start with you. They were not good parents. That was what if you ask me right now what I took out of it from his childhood, they were not good parents. She was a pain in the neck, much too insular, never taught him respect, civility. I can't take seriously with his leaving his first family, 3 kids, blowing off his wife, leaving her in the middle of nowhere, the alcohol and everything else, the make-up stories of the racism, which you can get into if you wish. The parents give him all the credit in the world for developing Tiger as a golfer, but as far as parental 101, they failed miserably. How about that?
I think this starts, Chris, in terms of the really seeing the pain that's caused by this is when he's at Stanford and he's a freshman and he's in the midst of his first real relationship with a woman, and there's true love there. This is a real relationship, and it's been going on for a few years.
This is the kid from high school.
This is Dina Gravel from high school. They are truly in love with each other, and they've done a lot of good for each other. And she sticks with him when he goes to Stanford as a freshman. And there's a point in that freshman year where she goes to Stanford to see him play. Tiger insisted she come. She traveled a long way to get there. They spent the night together. They're in a hotel room together and all this. And then Earl and Tita show up. And Earl and Tita weren't around Stanford very much. And so they come to this tournament. And by the time before this tournament's over, Dina Gravel is in her parents' hotel room because they came too. She's waiting for Tiger to meet her. He never does. What ends up happening is Dina's father gets a note from the bellman saying he's got a package downstairs. He goes down, and basically what it is it's Dina's suitcase that had been sent over from Tiger's room with all her stuff stuffed in it, and a letter from him saying basically it's over. It is so out of left field. So you can't imagine that this actually happened. Like a relationship that's gone on this long, this is how it's ending? Like this?
With lies in the letter. Tell me about the lies.
Things in the letters that aren't true, Chris. It's allegations that she's basically taking advantage of Tiger and talking to the media and
boasting that she's his
girlfriend. She was so against all that. The reason she didn't go with him when he went north is that she wanted to be away from all the visibility that comes with him being a star. And this to us, especially to her, we spent a lot of time with Dina. She was crushed by this. Her parents were crushed. They treated Tiger like a member of the family for years.
And he loved going to the house and everything.
He loved going over there because of the atmosphere in that house. So when you talk about parenting, Chris, I think, look, we have talked about some of the positive implications. Some of the negative implications of this approach is that there were relationships that Tiger was in that were ruined. And they were ruined unnecessarily. And there were people around him, Chris, who genuinely cared about him as a human being, not as a golfer. There were always people around him who cared about him only because he was a great golfer. But there were occasions when he met people who cared about him as a person. Dina was one of those people, and she got thrown by the side of the road.
It was cold-blooded. It's like you are amputated because she was seen by Earl and Tita as an impediment to Tiger's future. She was an obstacle. She didn't need to be there because they had bigger plans in place. And as much as Earl liked to talk about, and Tiger liked to talk about the fact that he was going to stay at Stanford for 4 years, one of the things we learned was there was a plan in place months before. That Hello World commercial that Jim Riswold was the creative genius behind was in the works for several weeks before Tiger made the so-called "I'm going pro" statement. So John Merchant,
Jim Riswold was told to start thinking about the commercial months before.
Right.
John Merchant, an absolute, sort of an invisible but absolute critical presence in Tiger's life, systematically removed by Earl because he was seen as a threat with his guidance towards Tiger. You can look at Butch Harmon, you can look at Hank Haney, you can look at Stevie Williams, you can look at a number of people in Tiger's life. Greg Nard, who was his kind of aide de camp, was with him for 8 years. All the people that could have given him guidance and kept him within the guardrails as his life is accelerating in fame and extreme fame and fortune. those voices were all gone.
We have to spend a minute or two here on this race angle. Jeff, you take it on the race angle there with Tiger for years, telling everybody that he was a victim of a racial attack when he was in kindergarten. And I guess he played it a lot when he was an early pro. I don't remember it, but this is a way of Earl Woods making Tiger out to be Martin Luther King, that somehow he is subject to terrible race rioting when he was a kid in Anaheim, and you guys did a tremendous job of exposing that. Go ahead.
One thing that's interesting, Chris, is that Earl Woods was a victim of racism. That's a fact. It's not an opinion. It's a fact. And it started young for him, and he experienced it as a baseball player when he was in college, as the only black player on the team.
Kansas State.
Yeah, he ran into racism a lot, and he ran into it in the military. I mean, it was a part of his life, and it really bleeds through with him. I mean, there's no question how Earl Woods feels about race, and he was very outspoken about it. He said a lot about it as Tiger was coming up. Tiger was never outspoken about race. He was never comfortable talking about race. In fact, he went out of his way to distance himself from talking about race in high school when reporters would try to get him to engage. In college, the New York Times Magazine was following him around, trying to get him to talk about going to Shoal Creek. He didn't want to talk about race. It was not part of who he was. And I think part of that, in fairness, is that he's still pretty young, and he's getting asked by Oprah Winfrey and the New York Times and all these publications to weigh in on something that I don't think he'd really had time to consider how he really felt about some of these big picture issues. Then all of a sudden, this story starts to emerge, and it comes in trickles about something that happened back when he was in kindergarten. And it's, as it's told over and over again to different journalists, it's told a little differently each time. There's more facts put in or more allegations put in, and it becomes more embellished. And Earl is actually driving this story more than Tiger is. But as we started looking at it, I mean, Armen went to the school. We interviewed the teachers.
I know you did. Yeah.
And when you get
the highway, there's no way this could have happened.
No way
run home
right.
because there's
I would literally walk those grounds with the guy who was the head of supervising or maintenance and all the security at the schools, and I was like, there's no way he gets out of this playground on the first day of kindergarten. When our kids have gone to kindergarten, there's supervisors and administrators and teachers all over the place. And it, just to follow up, it starts in around 93. And you see it in the LA Times, and it's like my first day of school. I had rocks thrown at me. I had, I had the N-word written on me, spray painted. You're thinking, wow, the first day of school? How does that happen? And then it starts to percolate. It gets a little more aggressive. It shows up in 90, Oprah Winfrey. It shows up on Barbara Walters. It's repeated in 2006 with Ed Bradley on 60 Minutes. But by then he just kind of dismisses it. But when we were doing the timeline for this book and trying to understand how things change, I was charting it, and I was like, okay, he says it this way here. Even in their own official DVD, which comes out in 2004, Earl says it happened the first day of first grade. He can't even get his story straight.
Whether it's first grade or kindergarten, bunch of sixth graders attacking.
They attack him, and they couldn't get into that playground.
Yeah, because it's partitioned. The kindergarten's in one place.
And then, as you said, he's got to cross. He lived about a tenth of a mile from the school, but he's got to cross 5 lanes of traffic in front of a crossing guard. And if he's got, spray painted the N-word on him, I mean, come on.
And bleeding.
Made up the story.
Made up the story.
And Earl made it up. Tiger went with it for a long time, and I'll give Tiger the benefit of the doubt for a good part of it, but by the time he's an adult, he should know this is a bunch of nonsense. And that's where he gets abused.
Yeah, I think that's where you have to look at it and say, this was the racial narrative. They needed a racial component. Because Earl, one of the things he said, in this country, there are 2 things. It's white and non-white. That's how he saw it. And he said the same thing to Tita when they were going to get married. You have to understand, in his mind, America was a racist country, and in some respects, Tiger was his revenge.
Remember too. Let's before we take a break, let's remember this too, Jeff. Earl Woods is outside of golf. He's not a good person. Okay, he left the family, 3 kids.
He was drinks, a bigamist, Chris.
A bigamist. He had 2 wives at one time, and he had to go to Mexico to marry the other. The guy's gotta be fair. I mean, I'm not. He's a terrible guy. He drinks. He chases harasses women. He ends up the Tiger's mother blows him off. Doesn't even have a headstone in his grave in Manhattan, Kansas, because you saw. I don't want anybody to see who this guy is. This is not a good person. We got to be fair. He's not a good person.
We were stunned. Both of actually when Armen called me and told me that he was working on the grave situation in Manchester, we didn't go there thinking we were going to find that.
Yeah.
We were just trying to find out where he was buried and what was there and all that. It was one of those really moments when we discovered that he has an unmarked grave of Earl Woods, whose obituary is in the New York Times.
And if you know anything about Earl Woods, there would have been a band playing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, spotlights,
Monument.
Earl Woods, Monument. I created this man, and he's buried.
There's nothing
you can't
there.
find Earl Woods' grave if your life depended on it.
Wow, Armen Keteyian and Jeff Benedict. We continue here with Tiger Woods. Don't go.